we see the gate of feelings. Third line is resignation. So the whole era being imprinted by the acceptance of what is. Now notice that arrow pointing up is because Pluto is exalting that solar effect. Okay, so people having the ability to have the acceptance what is. This is the awareness and manifestation of the law of regeneration, the laws of karma, reincarnation, and resurrection. Will the body graph change when the 1949 breaks down? Well, that's one of the changes, the mutative effect. That's the change, that channel will no longer be a channel, even though we still can have a 19 and a 49 separately. So they're going to have to change the software for sure, because visually, besides this, no, it's still the 9-center, because remember, we're in transitus, yeah? We are 9-centered in transitus forms, and the full raves are 9-centered. So real 9-centeredness is what we're going to see post 2027 in the generations to come. Real 9-centeredness, which I think he mentions in some of this stuff. So the fixing planet here is Pluto. See that? And Pluto is actually moving into that particular gate in April. And then it'll retrograde out for, I think it's in there for like a month or something, and then it'll retrograde out. So I found it fascinating that those of us with our suns in gate 30, line 3, will have this for quite a while. If it's in a cycle, like mine is my Chiron, the Pluto is there. So the rest of my life, this fixing towards the acceptance of what is, as far as the feeling to accept what is. And so when we see these third lines in the chart, not only Sun, Earth, and the personality, we've got Mars and Mercury and Jupiter and Saturn and the unconscious Mercury as well. Lots of threes in the new era. That's the dominant theme in this chart, if we counted it up, especially since this is a 3 on the personality Sun, Earth side. So we're entering into a realm or a time of trial and error, but Ra wants us to think about it in another way. So the deep theme of bonds made and broken being a very, very powerful theme. So we can understand this third line discovery, or third line on the material plane, is going to be one of the most dominant themes of the era. And when we look at that third line in Saturn, we combine it with the 45. We've also got a 6th line in gate 21 on the moon side, on the unconscious side. We see that money, or the channel of money, a design of a materialist, is going to be part of the thematic of the new era. So, you know, you've heard me talking about finding spirit through materialism, that 55 line 6. The new era also has the channel of money, design of a materialist. And, you know, we already see that in a lot of, just look at YouTube. And that's interesting. You know, I thought about it for a moment too with the new era. This is obviously the cross of contagion, as we'll see in a little bit. We have some slides there. Think about what contagions do. They spread the information, yeah? Like a virus, we just contagiate or infect people with something that we're enthused about, you know, just sharing what it is. And you can see a lot of people doing that on social media, YouTube being an example of that. Now, if we look at the grounding in the earth, also notice that we've got Mars and Jupiter. Mars exalting and Jupiter detrimenting this particular gate of perseverance in the third line evaluation. So learning about, in this context, properly assessed inaction. We have the extreme ends of the spectrum here. The value of understanding inaction relative to how we're going to experience this, maybe not being active, this ability to be passive, and how the earth might manifest that in our children born with this and moving beyond, you know, those who are very sensitively being imprinted by a cycle or what have you, instead of doing something. Now, I know I have this. I don't have the extremes. Yeah, I have something, whatever, depends on who I'm connected up with or what the transits are doing. I vacillate between the two. But you can see both of them whether it is up or down, they're both talking about caution. So learning properly assessed in action, or non-commitment if we're talking about a small group of people, because that's the trait that's going to give us commitment in a group of people. Is it this group? Is this the group that we really want to be a part of? So I find that interesting here. And here's the gates of the cross of contagion. So over here is where the sun would be, Ides of February there. And the gate of feelings, the sun, which is freedom recognized as an illusion and limitation accepted as a fate. Both Ra and I love this 30th gate. He says, we are not free. And boy, is it going to be shown to us that we are limited. We are all limited. The other side of this, we see the value or the beauty of being different, where being different is actually limited into an exaltation because of this exaltation into perfection, he says. It's the sun that is exalting that line. So having the 14 gate 5, or gate 14 line 5 is what exalts that line. Arrogance is the line there. The ever-present risk of being in a position of power. So the cross of contagion is what is going to take hold deeply in our new era from 2027 and beyond. This is something that as it goes through its trial and error process, he says, and if it is successful in that trial and error process, then universalizing qualities that are there are going to go out and are going to go out into the world, because that's the era. So when we look at the design sun in the 14.5, it's an interesting one because he says it's an undefined sacral. So then we can keynote this as not knowing when enough is enough, to hold on to anything that gives a sense of certainty that they're in the right direction while not knowing what is interesting. So that's the not self that's going to be out there relative to if we were to use this to move forward into the future as far as the frequency. You don't have to read it only with what is defined. You can read it with what is undefined as well. So the gate of contribution, that's the earth. We have yet to look at that aspect. And here it is, Dharma. 8.5 is holding together, does not exclude, I'm so sorry, you guys, does not exclude eventual separation. Successful union after a proper term will encourage separation. The fledgling, once mature, is expected to leave the nest. This is right action which does not harm the integrity of the union. So the 8.5, he says he loves it. So do I. It's mine, after all. This is absolutely incredible as a line, he says, given these circumstances, at least again, in my perspective. What a fascinating line to have there, the physical grounding in the body, the theme of the body itself, Dharma. So something else to grasp here, if you look at the personality side, we go over to the sun, earth, they are both in 4th color and 6th tone. So that means the 6th tone pulling it to the right as a fixing means it's cyclical and it is about acceptance. Another thematic, we're repeating theme of the acceptance, right? Acceptance of what is being the 3, acceptance being the 6. And the 4 brings us a need as far as a motivational frequency. If we go over to the PHS side and the internal sun, earth, we have the sun being the fixing planet, as I mentioned, for the 14, the 5th color, and also 5th tone. So again, right fixed. Right fixed, 5 and 6, they're both cyclical in nature, if you remember from last week. So this is a right fixed cross, a right fixed moment, he says, for the emergence of what is the awareness of rightness, yeah? Passivity, receptivity, and feeling cognition for the 5, which is about frequency, and 5 is sound, if you recall from your PHS studies. So the 21 now, we're going to look at the gate of the hunter and huntress, 6th line. Chaos, where ineffective action leads to disorder. Now here, the exaltation says the war of attrition. And the detriment, withdrawal and a reliance on inner order in a chaotic situation. So Ra says there are cautions. The moon in the 21-6, chaos, ineffective action leads to disorder. So he's speaking to the nature of potential for war here. And in this particular chart, there are several mentions for the world war. Not only do we have the unconscious moon, the war of attrition, we have this spiritual warrior, the unconscious Neptune, hydration of humanity, serving humanity. The 25 is innocence, spirit of the self. So 4th line, influential, spiritual warrior. He says there's no coincidence. Truly, there aren't any coincidences. So the material direction is going to be chaotic, and that there are things to be aware of in the body here. The last one with the nodes, the innate nature to apply energy in times of war and peace. So there's the unconscious nodal environment that we're going to be going through. So when the nodes move into the 29 line 1, if somebody wants to go and get that date for us, we might be able to put it on a calendar and see, is this a time where war ramps up? You know, there's a lot of threat of that going around where I live in my part of the world anyway. This is the design moon again, chaos line. And if we look at Saturn, powerlessness, this is the one that I have in my Venus, where the just are condemned to a futile confrontation with superior forces. So Saturn, where we are constrained or restrained, restricted, we're looking at a highly ego-dominated and emotionally driven era. So what happens in the not self? Yeah, some real bossy people out there telling other people what to do, potentially very impatient people, not necessarily being able to wait because not knowing when enough is enough. Over here is the conditioning theme. And we also have the gate of revolution, which we know is also a war gate. When you think about that, the nodes, revolution, the gate of principles. If we go back, that would be curious. I would be interested what the last eras brought. Every time I watched a regular astrologer about Pluto going into Aquarius and them coming up with a lot of different wars. So I would be curious to know when Pluto went into gate 41 last time, what nodes were there? What nodes bring wars? Here we have a revolution, gate of principles, which can do that too. So this look into the future, because that's what the nodes are. It's going to cut itself off, from the 19. So it's not there. There's not going to be a particular channel. You can see that Katja put the gray back there, so you can see that they don't connect. Maybe that's one of the things that they'll do in the BodyGraph, Natalie, is, make it so that you can't see through it anymore. It'll just be a spot and short ends of the stick now for the 49s and 19s, just a different way. Okay, so this is the line of revolution's last resort. Second line, last resort. Exaltation is the determination to exhaust every possible peaceful avenue for change, and then, when satisfied that no other course is possible, to plan in detail before revolution is attempted. Oh yes, 49.2 reminds you of the natural butcher. So, attempting to find peace. Oh God, natural butcher. My mind went to, I was watching The Magicians, and they have this evil magicians who had trapped fairies, and they would cut off pieces of the fairies' legs and arms and stuff, hands, to grind their bones into fairy dust to snort because it gave them magic powers. That's not peaceful. That's very violent. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. To look out into the world and to try and attempt the chaos that is out there is part of what we're going to be seeing. Yeah, because twos don't like issue. They like more Harmony, remember? P2s prefer harmony. So the last resort, good line there. And here's the detriment. The overwhelming revolutionary urge that is impatient with accommodation and negotiation. The tendency here is the coup d'etat that has little general support, impatience with accommodation. So looking out the window all through that era at this, because remember, this is the frequency that's carried into the entire 400 years. Wow. The gate of formalization, second line, acceptance. Yeah, answers up here. The bold blue is the recognition of limitation in oneself and others leads to tolerance and the suspension of judgment. On one side, the mother, which always pardons the errant child, and the other is the assertion of the ego at the expense of others' failures. So what he says is, what is the human mother to do with her rave child? It is her child. It will come out of her body. No matter how different it may operate, it is still out of her body. And then he says, so what a lovely line, acceptance. To be able to accept, you can see acceptance of what is with the 30, acceptance through the tonal cognition, and here the way that we're being conditioned to see things, yeah, because this is the south node, acceptance. So to be able to accept the child that comes out of the body, no matter how different they may be, because they will be. And when we put those two together, both these dual themes of the nodal perspective, he says the acceptance and that the mother is going to pardon the mutation is what is the beginning of this process is going to look like. And it's going to move more and more towards that 49 last resort. Yet all of that will be out there in this landscape. And to our advantage, because there are no accidents, no coincidences. It's there for a reason. So on the unconscious nodal side, we'll see the gate of feelings again, but now we're in the first line, thank heavens, because this is composure. Balance, learning about balance in the face of disorder. We know it's going to be a chaotic time, chaos, challenging direction, material direction, chaotic, and emotionally volatile for some people. In some people, they won't be born with the motor of the emotional intelligence vacillating their awareness. They won't have that. They'll just have spirit awareness. Not all people, some. So when we look at the design nodes, this is again, here we're talking about external environment. The external environment in which balance in the face of disorder with this theme of composure, because disorder is going to exist, he says, it just will. It's an environment of disorder. It doesn't mean disorder in the riotous sense of the word or pandemonium. It just means disorder that the order of the way in which life has worked is going to change. So we have the gate of the fighter, Venus, in 38, line 6, misunderstanding, which talks about opposition without basis. Ross says that this is a perfect line for that situation. Misunderstanding, opposition without basis, the fighting, that there's going to be this vast misunderstanding with that Venus there. Mars, the gate of sexuality, in the third line of openness, in detriment. So where openness is transformed into promiscuity and its attendant problems, where the drive for empowerment through union and intimacy can lead to promiscuity. So talk about bonds made and broken here. We have sluts running around, happy to see that. No, promiscuity is, openness sexually. If you combine that with the key to the background frequency shift, which was the 59-6, the one night stand, the ability to have intimacy, whether for a moment or a lifetime. This line of openness being the same in the way that humans beyond this point, not so much just promiscuity, but desperate search for those that are going to be fertile. because it's more and more difficult to be able to produce after this mutative shift, because the human population is going to contract. We as humans, if you haven't noticed, are already on the decline fertility, because we have a lot of issue with getting pregnant. There's lots of clinics like that. If you want to be able to make some money for your grandchildren, Ra recommends to invest in the kinds of technologies that allow for people to get pregnant. So new technologies, new drugs, that kind of thing, because that's going to be more and more what people want to be able to do, is get pregnant, have children, because the fertility of humanity is on the decline. Not only the immune system, but when people are sick, they're not as likely to be able to procreate or have viable pregnancies. So now we have the 17 gate of opinion. Fifth line, no human is an island. And he likes that it's Saturn. Saturn for him always represents the solidity of the past and not the instability of our era. So he says it's a fundamental conflict between Uranus and Saturn. The Saturnian world was very stable. It operated very neatly. Remember, Saturnian, we're talking about the 90,000 years. We had Saturnian bodies. So it was stable, operated neatly. Everybody paid attention or they died. And we live in a Uranian world that's full of all kinds of different things. Yeah, the Uranian changes to this nine-centered human vehicle. So the fifth line, no human is an island. The recognition, however understood, that there is no end to hierarchies. Exaltation is the ultimate creative expression of interdependency, whether as God's will or global synthesis. Opinions that can express the value of being organized, whether mundane or spiritual. So the ultimate creative interdependency, whether as God will, for God's will, or global synthesis there. Now, on the flip side, we see the possibility of opinions that refuse to see the value of being organized. So the value of hierarchies, that there's no end to hierarchies. We're about to be lowered in terms of our place in the hierarchy, was his assessment of this, where we as human beings always stood at the top, with the exceptions of angels and gods that we put above us. But in fact, we're no longer going to be at the top of the hierarchy at all.